We came here 7,000 years ago to protect humans from the Deviants.
Okay, hi, back again. Obviously I'm back again. I didn't go anywhere. Well, that's not true. I did go and see Eternals, the new Marvel movie that's out. Eternals about these ancient warriors that have been on Earth for like 7,000 years and everything like that, and like kind of help push and shape humanity a little bit at times. Um, yeah. So I already did the review about that. That's already up. Um, this is going to be a video where I kind of break down the different mythological references that they throw out in, um, within the movie itself, and kind of what the characters are roundabout ways of referencing. Now, admittedly, I doubt I'll catch all of them. I'm going over for mainly, I was like, well, I recognize that name from this thing in mythology, and that name from this thing in mythology, and that other thing, and they blatantly point out different references in the movie itself in regards to like who the different characters are kind of well, okay, so it's a weird way of doing this because obviously in our world, because we don't actually have superheroes, isn't like superheroes like with superpowers and everything. We have heroes like doctors and nurses and firefighters and things like that, of course, or just everyday people that are doing good things. Those are our versions of superheroes. But in regards to we also in our world have lots of myths and legends, and to a degree I would say that Marvel and DC and other comic book companies, and even manga and anime at this point in time, have kind of given us other variations of a mythos. A lot of us grow up hearing legends about Greek mythology or Roman mythology or Egyptian mythology. Norse mythology gets thrown in there a lot now because of Thor being a little bit more of a thing. There's Mesoamerican mythologies that get pulled into things, and other other types of mythologies that go along with the other tribes and everything like that. And I'm actually recording this like the weekend before Thanksgiving, so in America there's kind of the Thanksgiving thing, that story that has grown and grown and grown. In regards to what Thanksgiving is, and then of course even with that leading in after Thanksgiving, the next big holiday for most of the world is Christmas. Not that there's not Hanukkah and a bunch of other holidays as well, that kind of center around different variations of different types of celebrations, like Kwanzaa is another one too. But this is not about celebrations. This is about different types of mythology. And with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and with the Marvel comic books, the way that they have this set up is that 7,000 years ago, which we see this in the beginning of the movie, the Eternals, these 10, deities or heroes, warriors, Eternals, immortal, warriors, came to Earth from another, from somewhere out in space. In the movie, we find out that they're just, created life forms that are just there to push humanity or push the residents of a planet into growing, and then eventually they use that to make the way of basically feeding and creating new celestials, which okay, but in result of that the earth gets destroyed, and I don't want the earth to be destroyed. But basically what ends up happening is they come to Earth 7,000 years ago, in ancient Mesopotamia, with build Babylon and everything like that. But what we see is that they are the inspiration for a lot of these other myths. And the roundabout way that they do that in the movie is that like their names, like Gilgamesh and Athena and Icarus, and a few of the other names that the Eternals have, kind of get adjusted or shifted in regards to how they're spelled. I think Gilgamesh is just spelled the same either way, but like Athena becomes Athena, and there's a few other ones here and there where like the names get slightly changed, or just over the course of time. Like obviously the spelling is a little bit different than we're familiar with. I actually have like a slight stack of books over here that I'm going to use to pull out references for stuff as well for this. But basically it's the Eternals showed up 7,000 years ago. and then they, lived through, human history for the past 7,000 years, and, kind of pushed humanity a little bit at a time, gave them, insight, helped them, different things like that, fought off the deviants, of course, because that's the main reason that they're here on Earth, is to, like, fight off the deviants. And again, I'm just going to point this out here. Deviants might kind of just be the inspiration for, like, where the concept of, like, dragons and sea monsters and these horrible creatures came from, because, like, they would just attack the normal people, and then the Eternals would show up and kill them. So also, I have dinosaur shirt on today because reasons. Eternals and the deviants and dinosaurs and dragons and other monsters kind of mix together, I guess, to a degree, and like kind of influence each other to a degree, I guess, in the case of the Marvel movies. But then the Eternals then live through all of human history. They fight these deviants. They don't really get involved in like human wars, because that's not why they're there. But like they fight off these deviants, and to a degree they probably have different adventures. And then one of the Eternals, Sprite, who I'll go over what she references later, she is this storyteller, and she fabricates these different stories to tell the different people that they live around. Like she comes up with like the Gilgamesh myth, and then she like comes up with all these other myths about about the different Eternals, and then probably other characters that she just kind of invents along the way. Or maybe a combination of like, oh, some of these myths are based on the Eternals, but then they also encountered other, remarkable humans over the centuries as well, or interacted with, other gods or other races that came to Earth over the time frame, and then kind of shifted through that, and like maybe some of them became other characters in the myth, or there were other remarkable humans or other actual humans, like kings or queens of different realms, different countries and kingdoms over the time that they interacted with, and then Sprite just kind of wove those into her stories. So we'll kind of start with the leader of the Eternals, and the initial leader of the Eternals is a character called Ajax. She's played by Salma Hayek in the movie, and she is her power in the movie is she has the ability to heal people. She also seems to be extremely smart. I don't know if she actually. I don't remember if we ever actually like see her do any like major fights in the movie. I don't think so. She's just kind of more like the leader of the Eternals, kind of helps point them in the right direction, helps them interact with humanity and stuff like that. And she is a reference, or roundabout way of it being that she is a reference from our world. She's a reference to the character Ajax. Her spelling is Ajak. The spelling of the character that she is referencing, the mythological character, is Ajax. Ajax. Not to be confused with Ajax Cleaning, or I guess Ajax from Deadpool, whose, I think his name was Francis in the movie, was his other name, was his real name. But in Greek mythology, which I wasn't as familiar with Ajax, I'm like, I know I've heard that name before, but I can't remember where I heard it when I'm watching the movie. And with Ajax is a character from the Trojan War, so like the Iliad, not the Odyssey itself, because the Odyssey takes place after the Trojan War. I do actually have a book of the Odyssey over here that I'll be using for a different reference, but the Iliad is the story of like the war of Troy, the Trojan War, Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships and everything like that. And Ajax was the second strongest out of all of the second greatest fighter out of all of the Trojan forces, second only to Achilles, of course, as the greatest. And he's just said to be this taller and larger and stronger than like any other men, and he's just one of the other fighters, and he kills lots of people in it. And he's only described as like a defensive warrior, so I'm assuming he mostly fights with a shield and stuff like that. And that might be like why Ajax in the movie has these healing powers, because like Ajax, the Greek character, was like this defensive type character for his fighting, and therefore like healing and defensive kind of go together. Again, I'm not extremely familiar with Ajax, so there's not too much what I can pull out from that. And I couldn't really find anything about them in this, although I do think in the initial comics, I think the initial appearance of Ajax, I think that the character was male, and then like they changed it into female for Salma Hayek in the movie. Also, the colors, and I don't remember if I pointed this out in the movie or in the movie review or not. I don't remember, but Ajax colors are like blue and gold. And the first civilization that they helped build up, Babylon, their colors for like the famous Babylon gates are thought to be blue and gold, and like the walls and everything around them and like the hanging gardens like, were thought to be like blue and gold, like this blue paint with like gold embossing all over it. And so we get those descriptions, and so it's like this roundabout way of influencing that. And the other reference that we have that Ajax is a roundabout reference to, as in the character Ajax, is the reference to the chief Mesoamerican god Quetzalcoatl, who is, of course, the giant, demon, serpent, dragon thingy that, is in a lot of the temples and everything like that. Now, we never see Salma Hayek's version of Ajax turn into a giant dragon, but I would not have had a problem with that. And I'm not as familiar with Quetzalcoatl. I have a Rayquaza in one of my Pokemon games that is named Quetzal, because obviously it's based off of Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl is, of course, this mixture of like a rattlesnake and a bird and everything like that. And, it's this combination of these, different types of animals, which is not surprising. And Quetzalcoatl was also the patron of like many different things of like learning and architecture and science and arts. Additionally, they were, it's also, he's the one that invented the calendar. So, while Ajax often, offers brawn, as in like the Greek version of Ajax offers this brawn type of thing, Quetzalcoatl adds brains into the equation. I actually got notes for this from like several different articles that I found. So I'm just kind of summoning up them. And that's when, Ajax, as in Ajax the character, loves humanity very much and is very loving and very caring and kind of like a maternal figure to a lot of the other Eternals. The next one, which is a fairly blatant reference in all honesty, is a reference to the Eternal Icarus. Icarus the Eternal, he's played by Richard Madden. And Icarus, of course, the most famous version of Icarus that, that we are familiar with, of course, is, Icarus is the boy who flew too close to the sun. And I do have something here that has Icarus in it. Oop, camera moved. Sorry. I put that note? There it is. Okay, so there are lots of famous paintings of Icarus, but Icarus flew too close to the sun, feathers fell off. This is actually, I think this was actually like the first Greek mythology book I ever got. I love this thing. But one of the things that is with Icarus, of course, Icarus the Eternal himself, he can fly and he has like, laser heat vision type thing. I don't remember if we ever find out if he has like enhanced strength, but he's, can fly and has laser vision, which is already pretty dang cool. And he is, kind of this like second in command to a degree for the Eternals. He's like one of the stronger ones. Not that the other ones aren't strong in their own right for different reasons, obviously. And we do kind of get this interesting, fight at the end of the movie, of course, where they kind of have to fight each other. But Icarus in the story is his father helped design the Greek version of Icarus. His father helped design the maze that is the crypt where the Minotaur lives. He built it for King Minos of Crete. And he is, so that way no one would know how to get out of the crypt, the giant maze. King Minos trapped him and trapped Icarus and his father, Daedalus. Apologize if I mispronounced that. He trapped, he locked them away so that way they couldn't escape. But of course, the father and Icarus and his father, of course, wanted to escape, and his father was a great inventor, so he invented these, wings for them to be able to have, for them to fly away. And Icarus, of course, because of his hubris, he flies much too close to the sun, as in like he just gets like too high in the atmosphere, and it's said to be in the story that like the feathers melt because the wax melts because he's too close to the sun. And the other way that can be taken is like he just got he flew too high and like the atmosphere was not there, but human couldn't physically fly that high anyway, without having a plane and other things, oxygen support and everything like that. But he falls to earth. The main reference that I have for Icarus is the Disney cartoon that was about Hercules, because like I love the fact that they basically took the Hercules animated series and it's basically all of it takes place within the song. Where the training song where in the first movie where Phil is training Hercules from this, little skinny, wimpy looking kid, but still strong, into, the big buff hero. And like the entire series basically takes place within that song. And one of the guys that's like Hercules' best friend is Icarus, who flew too close to the sun. And I just love that. And then in the myth, it's like Icarus dies, he falls to his death and everything. Smart dad, dumb kid. In the movie, of course, and in the comics, and I'm not as familiar with the comic counterparts for these, so I'm just kind of assuming that a lot of the powers are pretty similar to what they have in the movie. They might be a little bit different in some cases, but mostly similar. Icarus can also levitate himself and others, and he can go speeds up to 850 miles per hour. Probably mostly only, flying around Eternals, but, other people he could probably fly around too, depending on, I probably wouldn't be a good decision to try to fly me around because I would probably get sick. But, he has laser vision, of course, and of course, the other reference, which of course, they just throw it in the movie, and it's the trailers, and I love it. It's, he ends up, he's, talking to this kid, and the kid's like, I saw you on TV. You were Superman. You had laser vision and a cape and you were flying. And he's like, I don't wear a cape. Of course, that roundabout way of referencing Superman, of course, because Superman, of course, in the Superman comics and in the movies, of course, and pretty much anything Superman's in, he flies, he has laser vision, he has super strength, he has super speed, he's like invincible, it's like he can get, he can't really get hurt unless kryptonite is involved one way or the other. So it's just like, yeah, of course this works. And, he's a roundabout way of referencing that. Actually, surprisingly enough, I don't have any books that have Superman on the cover of them. But like, so that's another reference loop around to that. The next one is Circe. And Circe the Eternal is played by Gemma Chan. As I said, I do not remember every single actor or actress that played these, and I apologize, but I'll try to remember as many of them as I can for this. And it's stated that like Sprite came up with the legends of Icarus at one point when they were living in like, Greece. They were living in Greek. No, they were living in Greece. And then the other, Circe is a reference to the Greek kind of goddess mythology character who is a witch, and she is Circe as in the witch from the Odyssey. This is actually a graphic novel version of the Odyssey, and it's really fun. It's really well drawn. And what ends up happening is like Circe has interacted with several different characters through Greek mythology, with Jason and Medea and Odysseus being the main one for the Odyssey, with King Minos and with Scylla, who is this another type of a demon type creature. And in mythology, in the Odyssey, she has an island, and Odysseus and his men land on the island at some point, and she lures his men up to her castle, and she then transforms all of them into pigs. Because, she doesn't like men for whatever reason, or she only thinks men have like certain uses, and like these guys are all acting like pigs because they're like gobbling up the food that she gives them because they're starving. And, and then they turn into pigs. Odysseus has to then go and, free his men. And in doing so, he gets like help from from like Hermes, the Greek messenger god, and a few other bits. And he, is able to, he basically has to like, trick Circe or like satisfy her or whatever the case may be. You know, then the men get turned back to normal, and then like he conquers Circe. Read with that what you will. He does not kill her, but eventually he does leave the island. And like Circe pops up a few times, I think, in other myths, as I said. She is the daughter, one of the daughters of Helios, who is the sun god. But I don't really know too much else about her in regards to the rest of her lineage. But Circe in the movies is, or in the movie, her power is, of course, she can change molecules and atoms around, as I mentioned in the review. And she is able to then, you know, she could change like this book about the Odyssey into like a little miniature version of like, you know, the you know the you know the ship from the Odyssey, or like, you know, turn it into water, or turn it into like a flock of birds, or turn it into whatever. She could like, you know, touch everything in this room and turn it into different things. It is stated that she cannot change sentient beings, so she wouldn't be able to change me into another animal. Although by the end of the movie, she does kind of have she by technicality does have the ability to do that, because at one point she changes a deviant into like a giant tree, which she initially was not able to do. And then at the end of the movie, of course, she changes the celestial that is going to awaken from Earth into a giant, basically, thing of marble from what it looked like. By the end of the movie, and Circe is, you know, in the Greek myth of the Odyssey and everything, and of course, you know, the Odyssey is written by Homer, and it's based on the poem by Homer, and you know, it's, you know, Sprite kind of, you know, created these different characters, and you know, for all we know, at some point Circe just had a bad temper at one point, and she just had this thing where she was turning random things into pigs, for all I know. You know, maybe that's why she did that. Her and Icarus had like a bad breakup for a little while, or they had like a marriage spat, so she lived on an island for a while and like not turned men into pigs, but like turned different animals or different things into pigs. So it's just like, oh, she must turn humans into pigs or something like that. So I don't know. But like Circe in the movie actually like loves humanity, and you know, has this great adoration for them and everything. The next Eternal is Sprite. Now, Sprite in the Eternal. Oh, I dropped a book. I dropped Excalibur. I'll get to Excalibur in a little bit. But Sprite in the movie, as I mentioned, is based on pop. No. It's based on the drink Sprite. No. Sprite the Eternal, is this kind of roundabout reference to like Puck from A Midsummer Night's Dream, you know, tricksters, sprites, different types of, you know, little fairy type things. She's a reference to those. She is also physically looks like the youngest of all of the Eternals, and she is one that is kind of like, since the Eternals don't age, her mind gets older, so her mind understands that there's other stuff that she should be able to do, but because she is a child, physically she's about 12, 13 years old, she can't then, you know, like if she falls in love with someone, she can't actually go and have a relationship with them, which we'll get to. But one of the things is she is the one that's able to create these different illusions and images and stuff like that with her powers. And she makes up all these different stories and everything like that, as I said, based around either the actual Eternals themselves and using them as inspiration, or, you know, other things like that. And I have a small copy of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Puck, you know, this little mischievous little fairy thing that is sent by Oberon to go and do something. And here we get Puck again. And, you know, so Sprite makes all these different illusions and everything like that. And, you know, that's this reference to those and everything. And, you know, she also likes to, you know, do tricks and everything like that. And the other thing that she rolls around to, and this is just a blatant thing that they point out in the movie, that Kingo points out in the movie, is that they're kind of like all a roundabout way reference to Peter Pan. Peter Pan, Wendy, Tinkerbell, the Lost Boys. That Kingo says, you know, Icarus is Peter Pan, Circe is Wendy, you're Tinkerbell, and the rest of us are Lost Boys. You know, the Tinkerbell being Sprite, because it's Tinkerbell is in love with Peter Pan, but Peter Pan is of course in love with Wendy. Or depending on stuff, he ends up marrying like Wendy's granddaughter later on. And depending on the certain setups of it. But what happens is, of course, you know, in the movie, Sprite kind of betrays the rest of the Eternals to go with Icarus because she's in love with Icarus and has been for a very long time. And, you know, has, you know, for a very, very, very long time. And, you know, she's, you know, jealous of Circe and everything like that. And Tinkerbell is this creature where, of course, with fairies and with pixies, they're so small that they can only have one emotion at any given time. And for, you know, Sprite, you know, whenever like Icarus is around, you know, she's very happy to see Icarus, of course. Not that she doesn't love the rest of the Eternals, of course, because she does love them, but she loves Icarus the most because she's in love with him. And she is like jealous of, you know, Circe, that like Circe has had, you know, yeah, she's the one that got Icarus, but then she's also had, you know, Dane, who's the guy that she's in love with at the beginning of the movie, who's kind of like her human boyfriend type thing, played by Kit Harington. So she gets fought over by 2 Stark brothers. But, you know, Sprite gets very jealous whenever, you know, it's Circe and her and Icarus, because she can't have all of Icarus's attention because Icarus has eyes for Circe. So you get like that kind of, not quite a love triangle, but like, I guess like a V or something like that, with, you know, Sprite having eyes for Icarus and Icarus has eyes for Circe. And then I guess it goes off on this tangent because like Circe has like eyes for like Dane. So I don't know. Is that like a love Z? Is that what that would be? I don't know. It's sort of a love triangle to see. But so we get those references there. And like, Circe, Icarus, or Sprite at one point, and you know, the other thing I forgot to say with Icarus, of course, at the end of the movie, he flies into the freaking sun instead of like facing his own problems. It's like, you just literally betrayed your friends and tried to kill them to a degree, and is the cause of death of one of them in regards to Gilgamesh, and in regards to, you know, Ajax. And your punishment is you decide to fly into the sun instead of trying to fix what you did wrong. But, you know, Sprite, she kind of, you know, betrayed the rest of the Eternals to try to help, you know, Icarus, of course, because she loves him. The next Eternal is Gilgamesh, who I'm surprisingly enough, nothing fell, you didn't hear that. Moving on, sorry. The next one is Gilgamesh. This is another mythological book that I have, Myths and Legends from around the world. This kind of makes them a little more simplified than some of the other books, which is fine. But I'm not actually as extremely familiar with Gilgamesh as I wish I was. I am aware of the fact that in the movie he is played by Don Lee, and I know that Gilgamesh is like this first version of like a superhero. He's like this first very powerful hero that, you know, destroys an evil thing or conquers and goes on great adventures. He's a warrior king. And, you know, he is this, you know, from Sumerian warrior king, from, you know, so long ago, you know, the Epic of Gilgamesh and everything like that. That's, you know, like this first amazing over-the-top story. And there's a couple of different things that happen in the Epic of Gilgamesh. He has to fight this giant evil-looking goblin thing, Baba, I don't know. And he becomes friends with a man named Akidu. Again, I apologize if I mispronounced that. I'm not as familiar with Gilgamesh as I wish I was. And then in the end, his friend does die, unfortunately. And, you know, there's other sad things, of course, that happen with him. But he goes on these amazing adventures, and he's extremely strong, but very kind. And the Gilgamesh from the movie, who is the Eternal, references this. He is a very kind and gentle individual outside of fighting. He is extremely strong and, you know, can be very brutal when he's fighting against an enemy, but outside of that, he loves to bake and cook and, you know, do home repairs. And, he's the one that takes care of Athena during the time frame when her, her Maud Weary, is acting up, he takes care of her for like 500 years. Um, and keeps her safe and calms her down at times whenever it acts up, and all this other stuff, but he is like this very gentle and kind human. The next one, of course, just going straight from Gilgamesh into Athena. Athena is, of course, the Greek goddess of war, wisdom, and war. She's the daughter of Zeus and oh frick, what was her mother's name? Hold on, I marked the pages in here. Where did I put that? She is the daughter of Zeus and Metis. I knew the name, I just couldn't remember what it was. And of course, in mythology, Athena is born out of, Zeus's head. Because, Zeus is in love with Metis, and she's like his first love, and then like he's gonna marry Hera, but he doesn't want to be without Metis, and she's very wise, so he basically like, I don't know if he like swallows her or puts her in his head or something, but like she's inside of his head, and then at some point they have a daughter, and that's Athena, and like he has like these horrible headaches one day, and then it's he tells Festus, who I'll go over, take your freaking hammer and hit me on the head because there's something in my head that wants out. And like his head like cracks open and like out pops Athena, fully merged, an adult with a shield and a spear and a helmet and everything, because of course she does. And then she ends up being this goddess of wisdom and war, and she's kind of the counterpart to Ares, of course, and she's like this very kind and pleasant for the most part individual. She gets jealous, of course, at times because like she thinks that that wisdom is better, is better and more beautiful than just like beauty and everything like that. And I do like Athena, and of course, Athena in the movie is of course played by Angelina Jolie. The difference is, of course, Athena does not start with an A, and she like at one point when she's talking to like Festus's son, I think the son's name is Jack. She's like talking to him at one point, and he's like, "So are you Athena, like from the myths?" And she goes, "Athena, drop the A." And I just like that, and like she's fun and everything like that. And, like her powers, obviously, as I mentioned, her she can form these different like weapons out of light. Like she can form swords and spears and shields and different types of blades and everything like that out of this, out of like the light type stuff that they have. And that's her main power, is she does that. And mythology and everything like that, and she's also she's also the inspiration for like Minerva in the Roman version of the Greek myths. The other thing that they point out with her is that Athena is also because like at one point she's wielding Excalibur in the movie, because Excalibur is a real thing. Of course it is. She's like wielding Excalibur at one point in the movie. It's just like a random weapon that they have lying around. It's just like a sword that's like, is that Excalibur? Yeah, Arthur did always have a crush on you. So King Arthur. And I'm either like, okay, so either they're referencing the fact that she is a reference to the Lady in the Lake, who, at one point in time, Arthur's sword gets broken, Excalibur gets broken after a major battle, and he goes to this lake and he tosses the blade and the sword and the hilt and everything like that into the lake. I don't remember if he tosses in the sheath as well, but like he tosses them into the lake, and he ends up being gifted back another sword. Well, it's the same sword, but now it's healed and even stronger. And this is a graphic novel version of the Arthurian myth that I actually really like. My mom works for kind of our state library commission, so I get access to like different books and stuff like that. And so these are books that I've just collected over the years. But in this story, they have, not only does Arthur, fall in love with, Guinevere and stuff like that, he falls in love with a different lady who is a kind of a fairy, a fae, whose name is Lady Vivian or Vivian. And, they fall in love. And, it's the end of it is all is like he gets to go off with her. So, either, either, you know, Athena is this whole on, you know, cool looking sword there, picture shot. You know, it's either Athena is, you know, in that case, she's supposed to be like this reference to either the Lady of the Lake, which is, I guess, possible, or she is a reference to Vivian. I don't know if that was just a character that was just made up for this graphic novel, or if that was actually part of the story. I'm not as familiar with that for that section of the Arthurian legend, but for some reason, and I was bored at work the other day, I googled Monty Python memes because you do. And you know, a bunch of stuff pops up, of course, for Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and like there's this scene for like if any of you have never seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, don't be sad. I've only seen it twice, but I still find it very funny. At one point, like Arthur is like talking to these like peasants, and they're just like, "But I'm your king. I didn't know we had a king. I was gifted a sword by the Lady of the Lake. Our monarchy is not. Some woman giving you a sword does not make you king." You know, I love that whole joke that they throw in there. That's just funny. I love Monty Python. But you know, so either she's, you know, either, you know, Athena, that way of referencing around is this reference to either the Lady of the Lake, or like, you know, Vivian, if that was a thing, or just like some other woman that Arthur was in love with. Not as familiar with that one, so I don't know if there's that many other females in the myth or not. Next up, we have Festus, the Eternal Festus, played by Brian Tyree Henry. He is a reference to, of course, the where did I put it? The Greek god Hephaestus, of course. You know, god of the forge and fire. You know, god of forge and fire and everything like that. He is, of course, in mythology. He is the son of Zeus and Hera. And he, you know, when he was born, I guess he was so ugly that like Hera just like tossed him off of the heavens, and he fell, and he was then, you know, you know, his legs were broken, and his, you know, he's then raised by like, you know, sprites and nymphs and everything like that, and he becomes very good and, you know, at crafting things and everything like that, and he ends up then later on he's, you know, brought back to Olympus and takes up his rightful spot as one of the gods, you know, god of fire and forge and, you know, inventing and everything like that, innovation and everything. And he's also the one that ends up in mythology, ends up marrying Athena. Or not, excuse me, whoa, no, not Athena, Aphrodite, sorry. Wait, no, not that. He, in mythology, he's the one that marries Aphrodite. And of course, Aphrodite is, you know, off being in love with Ares because, you know, love and war. And what ends up happening, of course, in, you know, mythology is, of course, Hephaestus makes all these amazing things, and weapons and shields and, you know, swords go with weapons. But like he makes all these different things. He's the one that like forges Zeus's thunderbolt at times. And he makes like amazing, beautiful jewelry for like his mother, for Hera, and for, you know, Aphrodite. He makes her beautiful things. And Athena and Hephaestus, actually, if I remember correctly, from mythology, actually get along rather well. It's Athena and Poseidon that don't get along, and Athena and Ares that don't get along. But Festus in the Marvel movie in Eternals, as I said, he's played by Brian Tyree Henry, and his power is he is, of course, extremely smart, extremely intelligent. His job is to help make different inventions that help slowly push humanity forward. Not enough that like humanity won't be able to make their own inventions, but kind of slowly pushes them in different ways to help them. And like, oh, like at one point he wants to give them like a steam engine back in like the Babylonian days, but it's just like, let's not do that. So he just makes a plow instead. And, you know, it's like obviously humans continue to push themselves further and further. And in the movie, unfortunately, it is revealed that Festus is the one that ended up actually creating the. Unfortunately, he's the one that created the bombs that get dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The you know, nuclear bombs that get dropped there. And, you know, that's, you know, Festus in mythology, of course, has made lots of different weapons and everything like that, and probably killed lots of different people, or his weapons have killed lots of people. And in this case, it's Festus, you know, holds on to the fact that he's the reason that so many hundreds of millions, in those cases, well, not hundreds of millions, but thousands of people are dead because of that all at once. Civilians and everything all dead at once. And he holds that with him for a long time. He's also Festus in the movie is the only Eternal in a happy, successful marriage at this point in time, because Circe and Icarus were married at one point, but like Icarus then just kind of left. And like Athena and Gilgamesh aren't really like they're not married. I think their bond is more like the bond of friendship, or like brother and sister, not like not being in love. But this bond of like family and camaraderie and everything like that. Because we don't see them really having any of like that type of a thing. But I could be wrong on that if they throw that out in the comics, or they could build on that. I'm not sure, but I'm not 100% sure where they're going to go with that for Athena and Gilgamesh. But with Festus, he is the only one that's in a happy marriage, and him and his husband have their son that they love and adore. And he makes all these different amazing inventions, which is of course what Hephaestus did in mythology. Next up, we have Makari the Eternal. And Makari is, and I don't know why it took me so long to figure this out until I looked it up. Makari is just a reference around to Mercury, as in like the Roman god Mercury, as in like the Roman equivalent of Hermes. And Hermes, of course, in Greek mythology is the son of Zeus and a Titan named Maia, M-A-I-A. And he's this like little imp of a child when he's born, and at one point he steals like a bunch of sheep, or like a bunch of cows from someone, I think from Helios. He like steals Helios's cows or Apollo's cows when he's a baby. And then at some point in the future he ends up coming to Olympus, and like all the gods are trying to decide whether or not they want him to be on Olympus, and they all vote whether or not they want him to be there, and he does. And he's the one that ends up, he becomes like the messenger god, of course, and he brings messages to humanity from the gods and everything like that. Him and Athena are actually two of the ones that interact with humanity quite a bit. But Makar, so Mercury does that. He's very swift and everything like that with his, his wing sandals allow him to fly all over the place. And he also, I think he's also dealt with medicine, as I think one of the other things that Mercury deals with, Mercury and Hermes tend to deal with, is like medicine, but they're also like thieves and tricksters and very mischievous and everything like that as well. And one of the things that we see in the movie with Makari is she's extremely fast, obviously. And I mentioned this in the review, obviously, but I'll point it out here. She's also, I think she's also deaf. I don't remember if she's deaf and mute, but she's at least deaf. And so that's why, we see her doing sign language all the time, which is pretty cool. I like that. And one of the things that they do is, during the time frame when they were all like separated for like 500 years, apparently Makari has been going around, and she has like this pack rat collection of treasures from like all over the world. That like she's been keeping inside of the domo, that is like their ship that they had when they came to Earth, that she's been keeping in there for like building this stuff up for like 500 years or something like that. Like that's where they have like Excalibur, and like she had like a pack of like, at one point in the movie, I love this in the movie. She has like this pack of I think they're just like the Hostess cupcakes or whatever, but she has like a box of that, and then we see her and Icarus, and like Icarus is like holding this like green emerald jade looking tablet that's like very valuable, and he's like holding it up to her, and she like holds up the cupcakes, and they trade the cupcakes for the and it's just funny. And I mean, like, I love the interactions that you see with the Eternal, because like they've been around each other for thousands of years at this point in time, and even though they've been apart for 500 years, they still know each other kind of backwards and forwards to a degree. Although none of them figured out that Icarus was the traitor until the very end, unfortunately. It was almost too late. But of course, Makari has this ability. She is the fastest Eternal in existence. She also has the ability to think, so fast, just as fast as she runs. She can read and think and process information that quickly. So she's extremely, extremely smart as well. So like she could like read through all of these books and like all the books in this house probably so quickly it wouldn't even be funny. And then she'd probably steal something. But so she's like this, this representation of that. And then we have, this was one that I wasn't as familiar with. So the Eternal Kigo or Kigu, I apologize if I mispronounce his name, is this reference to this Babylonian mythology. And Kigo is played by I know the name, Kamal Nanjiani. Sorry. He's played by Kamal Nanjiani, who's a comedian, so of course he's like quite funny and witty and everything like that. And in mythology, I'm not as familiar with Babylonian mythology. I'm vaguely familiar with Gilgamesh, but that's kind of more Sumerian, but still. Kingo in mythology is kind of more, he is a minor Babylonian god, but he didn't really have any particular powers, and he died pretty quickly. That might be a meta joke for something, I don't know. But his mother was a goddess. In mythology, Kingo's mother was a goddess, and she gave him this tablet of destinies, which he wore as a breastplate, and which gave him great power. At some point in time, he's killed, and then like his body and blood are made to create the first humans. So I don't know. That's like I'm not super familiar with that one at all. And he's very good. Kingo in the movie. He can, fire off like lasers and stuff like that from like his fingers. And as I mentioned, he can like form like power of like, force power between his hands and like fire that off. Of, like, given his, his proclivity for loving, different types of pop culture, I'm pretty sure he has at least fired off a Kamehameha at some point in time. Which I'm like, I wouldn't blame him. But he's the one that goes on to be like, this actor and everything like that, and this Bollywood dynasty setup. But so he's this reference to that. I'm not as familiar with that section of Babylonian mythology. And then we have Druid. Now, I'm not as extremely familiar with druids, as in like druids and Drak and Dreg and Druk and other various versions of like silly names that are referenced to Druid. Now, Druid in the movie, he has the power to control people's minds, and druids they were these very kind of, or at least our modern day version of what we think druids are these different types of like Celtic priests and stuff that were very like in tuned with nature and the natural world and everything like that. And they would, there were like sorcerers and sorceresses and stuff like that. Probably not like on the level of like Harry Potter, but more like very like, in tuned with nature and everything like that. So we see that. And Druid in the movie, he's one of the ones that's very good at like communicating with humanity and everything like that. He can also just like control everyone, control all the humans in a room and just make them stop fighting, or just make them kill each other, I guess, if he wanted to. But that doesn't seem like a thing that he wants, because he doesn't like humans killing each other. Which I'm like, yeah, I don't really like humans killing each other either. But so Druid, I'm not as familiar with those ones. But he's kind of like this reference to maybe like different types of Slavic deities as well. And he's, I'm just not as familiar with that. So, and like, it's not specifically stated whether or not that's what he's 100% referenced to. Okay, I got 3 more and we're finished. The next one is is actually not an Eternal. He is a Deviant. It is the Deviant Crow, Kro. And he is a roundabout way of referencing Kronos, as in the father of the gods, as in the king of the Titans, as in the Titan of time, the deity of time in Greek mythology. This dude. And of course, the most famous thing, of course, that we know about Kronos is that in mythology, he is the father of the 6 original Olympian gods, husband to Rhea, and he devoured his own children, which plays into what Crow does in the movie, what the Deviant does in the movie. One of the Deviants, Crow, that he kind of evolves is from, attacked Ajax and like absorbed her healing power, and also just like absorbed her understanding of things and her intelligence to a degree. and then that allowed Crow as a deviant to like evolve into this new version of a deviant. And he is able to, you know, the deviant is able to like heal himself when he fights, and like I think he's able to like heal the other deviants as well, if he gets to them in time. And he at another point in time he fights Gilgamesh, and he like absorbs Gilgamesh's power too, and gets stronger and more sentient, and gets to the point where he now is able to communicate with the, you know, with the Eternals and with, you know, with everyone, but he's still bad, which is this roundabout way of referencing that like, oh, Kronos devoured his own children. And in this, Crow does the same thing to the Eternals. He you know, devours the power from Ajax, and then he devours the power from Gilgamesh, and he ends up being killed by Athena, by Athena, excuse me. He's killed by Athena in the end of the movie. And so, you know, after he tried to kind of like trick her, he is one that she kills. So he's no longer a problem, and I think they killed the rest of the deviants, but still, we'll see what happens with that. So he's this roundabout way of referencing Kronos or Saturn in, you know, Roman mythology. Yeah, Saturn. Next up, we have Tiamat the Celestial. Now, I am very well aware. I'm going to pull out two references here. I know that in My Hero Academia, they had the missiles that showed up several within the last couple of chapters with Star and Stripe. That she used, that these missiles, this like intercontinental amazing missiles showed up, and like they were called Tiamat, if I remember correctly. The other reference is that I know that Tiamat is also like a monster that pops up in I think different Final Fantasy games. I could be wrong on that, but Tiamat the Celestial is a reference to Tiamat, the is part of the religion of ancient Greece, or not, sorry, ancient Babylon, excuse me. That was the goddess of the sea, and mated with Abzu, the god of groundwater, and to produce younger gods. So she's like this kind of mother goddess in that, which is a very good choice in regards to having this celestial that's going to be born out of Earth being named Tiamat. I'm not super familiar with what they were expecting to do with, you know, what might happen with the, you know, Tiamat in the movie, since, you know, Tiamat got changed into a giant thing of marble. I don't know if they're going to do anything with that, but, you know, for all we know, there might be another way, like if Cersei connects with her power with her again, or with, with, another celestial and the other Eternals, she may be able to like revive Tiamat. We don't know. But she is this, Tiamat is the reference to, the goddess Tiamat from Babylonian mythology, which again, not as extremely familiar with as I wish I was. And finally, the final one that we have here. Okay. I had to talk about Harry Styles. Okay, so the final one here is, of course, Eros, who in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is played by Harry Styles, former One Direction, and he is the hotter, less purple brother of Thanos. He's this adventurer and warrior hero type thing that goes off, and he I didn't know this, but he has like the power to simulate pleasure in people's brains that are within a certain radius of him, which I'm like, I hope that doesn't affect his family, because that would be disturbing. Now, in mythology, Eros is the son of Aphrodite and I believe Ares, because they have I think they have 4 children, and I think they're called the Erototes or the Erotices or something like that, because they're all various versions of love. Eros is kind of like romantic love is what he represents, and he is, of course, Eros' counterpart is Cupid. But Eros is not like a giant chubby baby in a diaper. He does have a bow and arrow, though. That was true. And the main story that I know with him is Eros and Psyche. And Eros and Psyche is actually kind of the, I wouldn't say they're the basis for Romeo and Juliet, because that's a different story. That's the basis for Romeo and Juliet. But Eros and Psyche are one of my favorite Greek Greek myths, Roman myths, whichever one you want to go with. I kind of think that they're the inspiration for Beauty and the Beast, because like this girl has to make this deal to protect her kingdom and everything like that, because he's in love with her, and then she eventually falls in love with him, and there is like a kiss of true love that gets brought into that. But hey, I would be perfectly fine if they just wanted to like turn the story of like Eros and Psyche into like an actual movie. Or maybe, I don't know if in the comics if there's a character called Psyche. I know there's a character called Psylocke that's an X-Men, but I have no idea if there's a connection there. But in the movie, Eros is, of course, as I said, played by, Harry Styles, and he is this, not an Eternal in the movie, he's a Titan, because he's a brother of Kronos. And he showed up at the end of the movie, and he's going to then help the, Athena and Makari and Druid find the other Eternals and try to help save their friends and everything like that. So we'll see what happens with that. But he's like this roundabout way of referencing Eros, the Cupid type thing. And I'm okay with this. We'll see what happens with it. I'm assuming we're going to have them pop up in something else. I mean, like, either they'll pop up in, like, maybe Guardians of the Galaxy 3, since Gamora is his niece. Gamora and Nebula would be his adoptive nieces. And so, we'll see what happens. He likes to hang around with a troll called Pip, which I'm not familiar with. But, we'll see. But Eros pops up in a couple of different myths in regards to different things, like he, helps different people fall in love, and so many other things like that. Like his arrows are like, oh, if you're struck by one of his arrows, you fall in love with the first person that you see. And, his mother had wanted to have him shoot Psyche and have her fall in love with us. It was like a horrible king, because like Psyche was so beautiful. She wanted, because Athena was jealous, she wanted Psyche to fall in love with like a horrible human being, to make Psyche like miserable. But Eros accidentally ended up pricking his own finger while he was looking at Psyche, and he fell in love with her. And then at one point in time, Psyche accidentally ends up pricking one of her own fingers on one of the arrows while she's looking at him, and she falls in love with him. And then, via things, it's true love and everything like that. I don't know if that's where the concept of like true love's kiss came from, but I might pull that out of my hat at some point in time. Because like my mom and I are working our way through Once Upon a Time at this point in time, and currently we're watching this, we're at the arc where they're currently in hell in Hades, dealing with Hades. And I might do a video after we're done finished rewatching all of the Once Upon a Time series, where I might do a thing where I point out like the different acts of true love that happen throughout the series, but we'll see. But that's what I had for the different mythological references that are in, that are in the movie, that are in Eternals, as much as I could. I probably missed some, and I apologize for that. But the Avengers have their own myth, so I like the fact that it's like, okay, so in our world, these characters are named after these different types of mythological characters. And in the Marvel world, it's like, oh, they're the inspiration of these characters that then have their names. And then people are like, oh, don't you mean that? And it's like, no, I mean this. So it's just like, I love that roundabout joke that they threw in there. I just find that funny. So that's what we have. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And I am recording this like the weekend before Thanksgiving. So if this goes up before Thanksgiving, I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. And if this goes up after Thanksgiving, I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving. So, bye!
Humanity once believed we were gods. With what this planet now faces, they will believe again. You're about to meet the greatest warriors the world has ever known. Legendary, fashionable, powerful,